Hello and good morning everyone, and thank you for joining our VMware vRealize for Business webinar today. So we're joined here by Phil Davies, Solutions Architect from VMware, who will be presenting the webinar today. And then we also have Jessica Hendy from Bytes, who's our virtualization and end user computing specialist, if you have any questions for her at the end.
Good morning everybody. Today we're going to talk about vRealize for Business, and in particular talk about whether you have private cloud or public cloud infrastructure, or indeed just currently with your own data center. We're going to talk about how we can get a view into the costs associated with that data center, which gives us strong visibility into the cost that's associated with the infrastructure we're running. So as it's been said, my name is Phil Davies. I'm a VMware solution architect, and I primarily work in the central government space for VMware, where in fact I have a few customers who are currently utilizing the whole VMware vRealize suite, which I'll talk about a little in a minute, and in particular they're also using the vRealize business technology. So hopefully I can give you a good flavor of how it could help you moving forward, and as has been said, if there are any questions, please pop them in and we can address them later on. So I'm going to talk a little bit about just some common IT business management problems. I won't spend very much time on that, and then we'll talk specifically around VMware vRealize Business, where it fits in the overall VMware offering, and then talk about how it supports us around various areas like private cloud costing. I know not everyone views their internal data center as a private cloud, but certainly when I refer to private cloud, I'm also just talking about the standard data center someone's got where they have the VMware vSphere technology employed. I will also talk about private cloud costing and business management, and then there's a few pointers to where you can get some additional information. Okay, so around the common IT business management problems, so IT business management is a discipline in its own right. Many people today don't really employ IT business management as they're managing their internal IT, where decisions are typically made by gut feel, and people really don't have a great view across the business as to how much their IT is costing them. People obviously within the IT department involved in purchases, etc., may have a good feel for it, but the rest of the business who are utilizing that technology don't necessarily have much of a view on that. And that does tend to result in things like that resource being seen as free resource, people not really understanding the cost of what they're taking. So people may take potentially more than they need with no real care about that cost aspect. So being able to give someone a view onto the cost through some kind of showback mechanism can be really useful. For some people, they can go a step further and start to look at things like actually billing across different departments in an organization to look at really using IT as a thing that actually is getting money back to cover the cost that it's providing to the business. So it's often difficult to explain those costs, and certainly what we're looking to do with our approach to IT business management is to make that much easier. So if we go now and we look specifically at the current architecture that VMware uses for its software-defined data center, we're really looking at the ability to enable IT to become a broker of services to the rest of the business. And we're doing that really by providing a comprehensive capability that's not only providing the actual ability to look at the compute resource itself and provide the infrastructure via virtual machines, but also providing a comprehensive cloud management platform around that, which really gives us the ability to look at both the automation of that environment, and for that we have technology like vRealize automation. We have the operations side, so that's looking at how the environment is performing. It's looking at capacity management questions, and also questions around risk and efficiency. But the piece we're talking about today is that piece in orange, which is the real business view, which is trying to take a look at that cost to the business and how you can better understand the impact of what's going on in the IT infrastructure. And that can be from things as simple as the fact that we've maybe got a lot of idle machines. We can see those using a technology like vRealize Operations. If we employ something like vRealize Business, you can also see the actual cost that is, the cost that's being pushed across to the business by having those idle machines sitting around doing nothing. So the idea here is that what we have is a comprehensive platform which is therefore giving us a management platform for the whole of the server administration, the fabric of that infrastructure, and not just the IT infrastructure, but also things like labor costs and power costs, etc. So the platform overall delivers automated delivery with intelligent operations, but also this business insight. If we just think for a minute about how that works, so we have the operations, the automation, and the business component, then what we're really looking at here is a cloud management platform that enables users to take operational insight around performance and health to actually look at that from both structured and unstructured data. So that's all of the data coming out of the infrastructure, and combine that with financial insights to provide our cloud business management and benchmarking capabilities. So you can actually make powerful decisions about how to make changes in that infrastructure and to ensure that you're making efficient use of that infrastructure. So making those decisions and taking action can be a very powerful capability. So the vRealize Business for Cloud does sit in that overall capability that VMware has, so it's in that cloud management platform, but it can also be used standalone. So for example, if you just have a vSphere environment, it's possible to deploy the cloud vRealize Cloud for Business, and that can be deployed into just a vSphere environment and still provide costing information around what the cost to the business is of utilizing the resources in that. As you then move into more of the vRealize platform, that just becomes a more integrated and stronger capability. So for example, if you're using vRealize Business and you have vRealize Operations, then of course what you can get is a view on things like the cost of the actual usage that you're getting from that vSphere platform, because that usage data is coming very clearly in cloud operations, but also the things around, for example, how much it's going to cost you if you expand your environment. So it's that link between the business side and the cost side through to the operational technology that makes that difference. If I talk now specifically though around the vRealize for Business component, then what we're going to see is that there are some primary use cases, and the main capabilities that we deliver with this IT business management capability is based around three main use cases. And the first of those is very quickly and painlessly getting a view of the cost of your on-premise VMware estate and provide capabilities to address the core business functions associated with those infrastructure services. So with vRealize Business for Cloud, this gives you that visibility into the cost infrastructure, but it's not something that takes a lot of work, as the technology can be deployed very simply as an appliance, and it comes with a set of standard information around, benchmark information around the cost of infrastructure. So even on the first day when you install this product, you can start to get a flavor of the cost of your existing infrastructure. So once it's connected into the environment, it goes out and discovers the size of the estate and looks at all of the available resources across things like compute, processing power, storage, etc., and can give us a view on the pricing of that. It does come, as I say, with benchmark data, and that's also the same for things like the labour costs, etc. Of course, importantly, you may well want to be able to modify those, and that's also, of course, possible. So we can look at that private cloud costing, we can look at the business management, or you can even go a lot further to do what we call IT business management, although that actually does require a partner product, which is a level up from the vRealize business. It's a capability from a company called Digital Fuel, which also then gets into things like SLA management. But our vRealize business technology is absolutely able to deal with all of your initial costing and pricing issues. There are different versions of the technology, as I've said, and vRealize Business for Cloud for Standard primarily looks at those cloud costings. If you want to get into looking at public cloud and comparisons between different clouds, then that's where you go to vRealize Business for Advanced. And the enterprise product is the one that comes from a company called Digital Fuel. Just a couple of analyst statements around the technology before we start to talk about it in more depth. So here we've got comments from Gartner and Forrester. So the technology is very well respected in the industry, and it's very much a case that it's been built as part of VMware's software-defined data center. So for example, with the comment there from Forrester, we can see that not only do we have the automation and the operations piece, but having governance via the vRealize Business for Cloud component is seen as an important capability to give that rounded view and to help IT become that broker of IT into the business. So if we look at a couple of the areas, the first one I'm going to look at is private cloud costing. With vRealize Business for Cloud, we have the ability to very quickly understand the cost. vRealize Business for Cloud it is, as I said earlier, a virtual appliance which gets deployed, and the supplied benchmarks around costs mean that we can very quickly get that view. Obviously, my screen showing the pricing in dollars. We can obviously also, in the UK market, have it in pounds, but these are obviously dollar-based slides. The cost estimates cover the full scope of the infrastructure, so it is not just the fact that we're looking at the infrastructure itself, but also things like the labour cost and cost of software associated with the environment. And those cost drivers are things that you can look at directly. And indeed go and override by putting in your own data. So from day one you can get a flavour for the cost. You can make that more accurate by applying your own cost drivers into the model. Then VMware itself will obviously keep that benchmark data updated, and so on a regular basis you can essentially get new versions of that benchmark data to ensure that we keep up to date as we move forward over time. On this particular slide you can see that we can see some overall expenses. We can see how many virtual machines we've got, and we can see what we're consuming, and that's all there to give a very quick insight. Of course, there's the menu on the left which lets us dive through into other areas and to drill down into more detail. This is just showing us here where we can get some operational insight. So here we're actually looking specifically at the actual usage that we're making of things like CPU. So instead of just telling us what the cost of our overall infrastructure is, we can also see the direct cost of what we're using. This means that if you want to start providing show back to parts of your business, then you can absolutely do that, and you can show information around the actual cost of the infrastructure that people are using, and also get a view on trends and how that's changing over time. We can see summaries of the overall infrastructure, and you'll see there, for example, that we can see the difference there around servers that we've got that are running Windows 2012 and other servers that are running Windows 2015. So lots of ways that we can look at the data that's coming out of the platform, and it can really help to inform us around the actual cost being incurred both on a daily basis and also across different lines of business within our environment. There's always detailed drill down that's available, and that enables you to get a much clearer picture of what's going on. We do have very fast time to value, as I've talked about, where we actually do provide benchmarking data, and all of the initial views when you first look at the product will be based on that benchmark data. You can also, once you've looked at applying some of your own costs into the model, you can also see that difference between our benchmark data, which is kind of industry average, and see how well you're doing against those particular benchmarks. If I look at Cloud Business Management, which is where we'd be moving across into the advanced version of the product, in this technology, this gives us a capability to not only look at our own internal private cloud capabilities, but we can also start to look at costs associated with public clouds such as Amazon or Azure or VMware vCloud Air. So this is a very strong capability because it lets us look at things like the cost of a VM or group of VMs, and then we can actually see, using specific amounts of memory and CPU, how much that would cost to configure in our own data center and set up in our own data center versus how much it would cost if we decided to push that out to Amazon Web Services. Because we have things like labor costs and power costs, etc., we can actually get a fairly comprehensive view on the overall costs, so not just the headline costs of, well, it cost me X dollars for a VM with this amount of memory, but we can actually look at the real cost of using that in terms of the cost, that the additional costs that we'd have to consider when we're looking at that. So that does help you to look at where things will be cheaper for you. So it could be that some of your workloads, the cost is not actually as important as the type of workload, or maybe because of security issues, some things may be required to run in your own cloud. But if it is just a cost-based decision, then this can certainly help you look at how much that would cost and give you comparisons between the different platforms. If you look at private cloud, then in the private cloud context, we can also start to see information around how much the cost is, but that can support us very much around things like looking to simulate scenarios where we would see the impact of placing workloads, for example, in different data centers, or help us to explore things like data center transformation and consolidation scenarios by actually simulating workload transformation between data centers. So in this particular case, we can see where we've drilled down to look at the specific costs on a particular data center, and that helps us to get a much more informed decision about how things have been currently distributed in our data center, and it can give us a much clearer view as to what would happen if we make changes to how we've currently got that set up. We can also enter budgets into the environment. So vRealize Business lets us put in our budgets. Being able to put in those budgets lets us track expenses against the budget, which of course is a key responsibility if we want to be that broker of services to the business. And we need to make sure that we're sticking within budget, and also potentially having that show back capability to show the business where we may be straying away from the budget. vRealize Business for Cloud does provide us with that full capability to have budgets and to compare the actual running costs versus those budgets. And we can actually see how that is currently set, and if we are using charging rather than just showback, we can also see how the charging is working against the budgets. If we look at pricing, which is important if we do want to have that chargeback capability, then the idea of having pricing that's different than the cost becomes important, because what we want to be able to do there is to define pricing policies across the different cloud infrastructure that we're using, whether that's private cloud or public cloud, and be able to also quickly adjust rates. So over time, if we need to change how we're charging and what our pricing looks like, then that's something that we can do in the technology and get a very clear view as to what we're essentially passing through to the customers if we're doing a chargeback function, and to ensure that we are covering all of the costs, because we have all of those cost drivers in the model, including things like labor costs. So it's something that's more comprehensive than just passing through the actual cost of the compute power itself. It lets us understand that cost basis of our services and the service components, and we can apply appropriate uplifts if we're looking to have that capability to act as a business within the business, and it lets us very much have the ability to then pass through the showback capability if all we want to do is show a cost to the business, or actually to support the process of generating bills if we actually want to go and charge the business for the facilities that they're utilizing. As I said, it does also include things like the labor costs, but for example, that might be labor costs that spread across different components. For example, we might say that the labor cost per VM for an administrator, given that we have a team of administrators who are there all the time, is essentially a fixed cost we'll apply across all of those machines, and then we could have, for example, additional costs, for example, based around the operating system management for those platforms. Depends what services you're offering within your business and how you actually want to charge for those. But this is a very comprehensive capability to get a fairly rich model of the real costs of those resources into the business. So for example, within central government, one of my customers there is currently utilizing a full chargeback model to really try to make clear to the business how much the infrastructure they're using is costing them. They have a full vRealize implementation where, for example, they have a service catalog. That service catalog shows pricing that's based on the data within the vRealize business technology, and that pricing is then something that the customers, when they go to the service catalog, immediately see, well, if I take this particular Linux box, for example, with this amount of RAM, this is how much it's going to cost me per month. And they can also do things like then set, for example, leases that would say, well, actually, I'm going to be careful. I'm going to set a lease time of only 3 months for this particular workload, and I can decide to renew that lease at a later date. But because we've got all of that cost information, it's making people less likely to essentially take resource and hoard it and just keep it even when they've finished using it. That showback capability and billing capability, it can actually absolutely be based around line of business, for example. So if you have different business functions and each business wants to be each line of business wants to be treated separately, then you can absolutely provide that capability using these functions. In this particular case, we can see here that we're showing month-to-date type charges, but also projected monthly charges based on what we've seen over the last 12 months. And we can also look at things like the different business services and applications that are involved. So it's the case that you can, by the use of the modeling capabilities of vRealize for Business, you can very clearly show, for example, the cost of particular applications that are running in the business. You could show that to people who are in a particular line of business, or you can get a good view across your entire business, for example, or how much your email service is costing, for example. But costing not just in resource, but in actual financial terms. Within the technology, the reporting capabilities are pretty strong, and they're essentially report templates which can then be modified to suit specifically the kind of views that you would like, and indeed to provide different kinds of views through the technology, where you can see different things depending on the role of the individuals being who are using the technology. An important aspect to vRealize for Business is its integration with the rest of the VMware environment. So if we talk just for a minute about those integrations, so to begin with, the essential integration really is vCenter itself. So if you have a vCenter in your environment, then when you first install the vRealize for Business appliance, that appliance will be pointed to your vCenter or vCenters, and that enables you to then immediately get that view on what the cost of that infrastructure is. But it also connects into public cloud technologies, so for example VMware's vCloud Air, Amazon's AWS and Microsoft's Azure, and obviously for those you'll need to be providing essentially credentials for it to connect into your Amazon AWS or your Microsoft Azure. It also connects with and integrates with the majority of VMware technologies like vCloud Director, vRealize Automation, which is the component that provides the self-service capability for providing internal private cloud functions, where people are actually able to go and look at the service catalog, see how much something costs, and bring that through. And vRealize Operations itself. vRealize Operations integration is a really important one. So if you currently use something like vSphere with operations management, so vSOM, or you just have vRealize Operations in your environment, then having this financial capability makes quite a big difference, because on things like looking at, for example, the impact of adding a new project into your infrastructure, you can see in vRealize Operations what the impact would be from a performance perspective and a capacity perspective. But if you have vRealize for Business, then it also adds in that capability to very clearly see how much that is actually going to cost if you implement that, not just from the fact that you're creating the VMs, but again, because we have all of the things like labor costs, etc., you can see a true cost of what that's going to be when it comes into existence. It also shows you the cost of problems. So, for example, if you have machines, as I said, that were idle, and you need to be able to look to recover those, then recovering them, of course, has impact on your actual capacity, but it also has a direct cost implication. We also integrate with EMC SRM, which is their operations management technology for their storage solutions, and vRealize Business for Enterprise, which is the technology that comes from Digital Fuel, is also able to integrate directly with vRealize for Business. So these integrations are important because there's no work for you to do essentially when you take on a technology like this. You know, it is a case of installing the appliance and immediately getting benefit by just pointing at the components of the VMware vRealize stack that you have in place. Once you've done that, there's no other integration work to be done. The only other work you might be looking to consider is to actually modify the benchmarking data, well not modify the benchmarking data, but to add in your own cost data so that you can properly see the costs in your terms rather than you based on those benchmarking figures. So hopefully that's giving you a pretty good overview of the technology itself and the capabilities. In terms of how you can find out more about the technologies, obviously you can talk directly to your Bytes team, but there are some online capabilities that I just wanted to highlight. One of those is VMware's hands-on labs. So the hands-on labs are a capability that lets you go just via an internet connection to get an actual vRealize business environment where you can actually go in and get hands-on experience of utilizing the technology. And that's something that you can get just via the internet by looking for VMware hands-on labs. And in this case, for example, you can look for this particular lab and be able to get, as I say, hands-on exercise with tutorial data around this particular capability. Of course, we have full education capabilities around the technology so that we can look at either online or classroom-based training courses, and those are things that you can get just as usual from the usual VMware training sources. So I think with that I'm going to come to a close and see actually if we have any questions around the technology.
Okay, thank you, Phil. So I'm going to hand back to my screen. So if you do have any questions, there is a little questions box just at the right hand side. So if you pop them in there, I'll read them out for Phil or for Jess. Obviously, if you prefer sitting outside the webinar, we've got our email there. I'll just wait a couple of minutes, see if we do have any come through. Okay, so a question here from James. He's asked, can the tool look at physical Windows servers too?
So currently the technology doesn't have that capability. No, it doesn't extend out to physical servers. This has been purpose-built for the VMware infrastructure, and it is the fact that it's connecting out to vCenter to get that data in the first instance. It is something that gets talked about internally, but certainly at this moment in time, it's not capable of bridging out to the physical, although of course that benchmark data and the cost data is based on the fact that those VMs are running on physical servers, so those physical server costs are part of that cost model. It's just that you can't go out to a non-virtualized world.
Okay, thank you, Phil. So I think that might be all the questions we have today. So Phil, thank you so much for presenting the webinar, and everyone, thank you for joining the webinar today. And as I mentioned earlier, I'll send you all a link to the recording just in case you didn't manage to watch the whole thing with your full attention, and if you would like to watch it. Also, there's a critique form at the end, so if you would like any more information at all, just pop that in there and we will be in touch with you. Okay, so thanks again everyone and enjoy the rest of your day.
Okay, thank you.